There are creatures in those woods. This world is a strange one. A little more than 30% of the world's landmass is covered in forest. Even in these modern times when it seems like everything is urbanized, the woods still claim almost a third of the land. So of course there is much of the world we haven't seen. Forests man have yet to step foot in. These are the areas where monsters hide. As these 5 real monsters in the woods encounters will show us, in the deepest, darkest parts of the woods, mysterious creatures live without fear of humans. To them, we're just another meal. Number 1. Something awful is living in these woods. Submitted by William L. Sorry for any grammar errors. English is not my first language. This story comes from myself, and it occurred 2 years ago on a hiking trip with my father. I will also mention I was 16 at the time that this story occurs. It was nearing the end of August, and my father had decided to take me on a hiking trip into the woods that lay on the edge of our property. This set of forest is quite expansive, and it is a nice place for a hike. There's plenty of hills, small patches of clearing, etc. So we packed up for the hike and rode out on our ATVs. If I remember correctly, we arrived at the trail at around 5 in the afternoon and began walking for about 20 minutes. It was so beautiful, with a crisp breeze here and there, and suddenly, we hear a noise. We are about 20 minutes into the woods, as I said before, from where we began, and this noise sounds like it's coming from around 25 to 30 feet ahead, and it's loud, like someone dropped a boulder from the top of a tree. I'm naturally a skittish person, so I jumped the moment I heard it. My dad starts laughing at me and asks me what's wrong. I respond with, "Dad, didn't you hear it?" He doesn't seem too worried. "Yeah, why?" "What was it?" He then informs me it was likely a bear dropping from a tree or possibly a large bird taking flight. In my imaginative mind, it does not add up. What kind of bird makes a noise that loud? We continue on the hike, and we find a tree. Every branch on one side is completely broken, like a large animal slid down, breaking every branch. I believe this is the source of the noise I heard earlier. I point and tell my dad to look. We both begin investigating the tree. He tells me that it is definitely a bear that slid down the tree. Still though, I don't believe him, but I go with it. We are now around 45 to 50 minutes into the hike. We stop to take a break and eat a little bit. We both packed sandwiches, me with a turkey and my dad with a chicken salad. He'd always loved chicken salad sandwiches. We talk about how nice it is out here and finish eating. At that time, it was about 6:20, and we begin hiking again. About 10 more minutes in, my dad stops me. He squats down. "William, come here." I walk up beside him and squat down as well. "What is it?" He points at the mud, and I'm chilled to the core. On the ground are a trail of footprints unlike any animal I've ever seen. The back of them are very slim. They start to get wider as they reach the toes. The toes are long and thin, with a faint claw mark at the end of each. My dad tells me he's never seen anything like them. I'm horrified. I'm now making connections in my head. Broken tree branches, awed footprints, multiple visions of horrific creatures are running through my mind. Then he tells me that we should turn around and head home. Not because he's scared, but it's getting kind of late. It's 6:35 and we are getting tired. We turn around and start heading back. As we pass a clearing in the trees, I see something out of the corner of my eye. Honestly, I'm tearing up thinking about this, having to write it down and experience it again. About 15 feet away is a tall, dark creature. It's just looking up at the sky. Its face is like a bird's. It has a long beak and sharp facial build. Its body is thin, and its arms hang down to its knees with long fingers on each hand. I start crying and scream for my dad to look, but it doesn't come out as a scream, it's a squeak of sorts. I yank on his jacket to get his attention, and he turns around to face me. I just point at the direction it's standing in. He's completely silent. My father is taken aback. The whole world just stands still for a moment. I thought time had stopped. This thing has no interest in us, it's just looking up at the sky still. And I look up as well, and in the tree right above it is the mangled body of some animal, torn apart beyond recognition. It's just staring up at it. That's when we run, faster than we've ever run before. I didn't hear anything following, so I guess it wasn't too interested in us. We reach the ATVs and hightail it the hell out of there, never looking back. When we got back home, not a word was spoken. We just got in, sat down, and watched TV. Even now, when I bring it up to him, he just tells me he doesn't want to talk about it. We haven't gone back to that hiking trail, and I doubt we ever will. Number 2. Something in the Woods. Submitted by Liam. For privacy reasons, I will not use my real name or anyone else involved in the story. The story all started when I was 10. I was camping with 3 of my friends, Dan, Ryan, and Connor, all 3 4 years older than me, but we did manage our friendship in spite of the large gap. So one day, we all go up to Tioga County, Pennsylvania to celebrate Dan's birthday. His father, who we'll call Frank, drove us up to one of the campsites. We started to set up our tents until we heard rustling in the bushes, which were only a few inches away from the campsite. At first we thought it was a coyote or something, but that wasn't the case. Everyone was frozen, not trying to make any noise to startle whatever the hell it was. But I decided to grab my rifle. It was a Remington Model 700 BDL. My father had given it to me before he was deployed to Iraq. I would take about 4 or 5 bullets with me, just in case one bullet wasn't enough. I slowly walked towards the bush with my rifle, raised and aimed at the now still bush. Ryan starting to slowly mumble, Liam. He sounded very, very startled as he said it. Afterwards, I saw something. It wasn't human. It stood about 7 feet tall, with legs similar to a goat's. Now, I've always watched quite a few paranormal videos, so I automatically thought it was the goatman. The thing was just standing there on top of the hill beyond the bushes, staring at us. We all stood there for 5 or 6 minutes, not knowing what to do. Eventually, the thing just walked away. We all remained still and horrified. For the rest of the trip, nothing really happened. But about 4 years later, we went back to that same campsite. This time it was for Connor, who was going to the army a few days later. Everything was fine until 11:30 one night. I started to hear screaming, or at least what sounded like screams. I quickly got up, grabbed my gun, and got out of the tent. I swear I saw that same creature from 4 years ago, this time attacking a deer. It was a gruesome sight, but I like to believe I have a strong stomach. I loaded a bullet into the chamber, slamming the bolt forward, and I fired at the thing's leg. It let out a blood-curdling scream. Afterwards, I loaded another bullet, but as I did so, the thing ran off. Dan, Connor, and Ryan ran out of their tents and all screamed in unison. "What the hell, Liam? Why'd you do that?" I told them what I saw. I told them what had happened. That night, we all barely slept. At 6, we all picked up our things and left without another word. If I hadn't shot it, I have no idea what it would have done next, to me or my friends. Number 3. Roadside Scare, submitted by Gothika. I drive the same road to and from work every day. It's an hour's drive, but the pay's good, so why complain? Well, I complain because of the road. Ever since I started traveling that road, which is the only route I have to get there, I've seen many unusual and unnatural things. Now, I'm no stranger to weird sightings and the paranormal run-ins, so as unnerving as the road is, it's not worth getting a new job over. Now, for privacy reasons, I'm not going to tell the exact location, save for it being one of the back road highways of Wisconsin. Alright, enough backstory and monologue. Let me tell you what still haunts my nightmares. I drive home late at night, and at one point on the turnoff of the highway I take, there is very little streetlights, if any. There's also very little traffic after my shift. Very rarely there might be 2 other vehicles on the road. This night was a trafficless one. I was halfway through my drive. All that could be seen were thick woods, the illuminated ground, a few wildlife, and a handful of deer. Without my headlights shining the way, there would be only the stars for any source of guidance. As I reached the 4-way stop that I had to turn at, I was idly listening to my friend on the speakerphone as I drove and just gazing off at the road. When I turned, my bored demeanor flared to one of confusion and then curious fear. Walking along the right side of the ditch, at first glance, I thought it was simply a deer on a nighttime stroll, but when I looked closer, everything changed and I nearly drove my car in the opposite ditch. My headlights swerved to briefly illuminate it enough for me to see it closely before I nearly crashed. Slowly, walking in the ditch was something I had never in my life seen before. It was the same height as a deer, but its frame was thin and slender like a greyhound. It had a long, thin tail hanging by its legs. No fur to speak of, just gray and hairless flesh. Now one could dismiss this as a mutated mixed dog or something like that, and I hadn't looked at its feet in my haste of a turn, but no, its face was no dog or deer. I can only describe it as almost human, or straight out of something Tim Burton would have created. It was haunting, to say the least. Its face was oval like a human's, high cheekbone area, slender, no nose or snout or bridge. It was perfectly ovular. It had large ovular black eyes where a deer or dog would have had them. There was no mouth that I saw unless you count the black hole at the very bottom of its face. I quickly swirled around, my friend asking what was wrong, why I had suddenly gone silent. The creature was gone. It vanished. Now there were trees all over. But where I had seen this thing, there were plowed fields next to it, and I had spun fast, but somehow it was still gone. I stayed there silently, my friend inquiring over the phone, but I was at a loss for what I had seen. The whole drive home I tried to explain it away. A deformed deer, a strange breed of dog, anything. But its face, its gaunt, nearly featureless face, didn't let me. I spent all night lost in thought, all week cautiously driving that area again, but I saw nothing. Well, nothing of that creature. The other things, well, those are for another time. I know I can't have been the only one to see something similar, but my trolling of paranormal creature sites keeps hitting brick walls. I know I didn't imagine it, but all I know is whatever it was, I'd kind of be okay if I never saw it again. Number 4. On the Drive Home. Submitted by Blackie523. I recently found your channel, and after listening to these stories about the rake, it reminded me of a creature I saw a few years ago. I've never shared this encounter with anyone. It was a few years ago on a moonless night. I was on my way home from work, off of second shift. That is, I go to work in the afternoon and get off at night. At the time, I lived on a country road with lots of curves, hills, and no street light. On that road, there is a dairy farm that has fields on one side of the road and a large patch of woods on the other. Having driven this road at night many times, I know where the deer would cross. I slowed down to drive around a curve and begin my descent down the first of many hills. At the bottom of this hill is where the deer would cross, so I knew to stay alert. As I came to the bottom of the hill, I saw a white figure in the middle of the road. I slowed to a stop. The figure was squatting in the middle of the road with its back towards me, hunched over, and with its face close to the ground as if it was sniffing the road. Its body honestly looked so thin, it looked like a skeleton with a thin layer of skin stretched over it. I could see its spine, long bony fingers, and elongated legs. I asked myself, what the hell is that? I honked my horn a few times, and then it turned its head, looking over its shoulder at me. That's when I saw two huge, black, glossy eyes. It let out a noise that sounded like a screech owl as it showed its teeth to me. It then turned and ran back into the woods. I mashed the throttle to the floor, driving as fast as I could towards my house. I had no idea if that thing was following me or not. But all I knew was that I had to get home before it got to me. I had to get to my gun. I hit my driveway going as fast as my little car could go. I stopped my car inches from the front porch. Then it dawned on me. How am I going to get from my car to my front door, unlock the door, and get inside? I took a deep breath, got out of my car, and ran for it. After dropping my keys numerous times, I finally got my door unlocked and was inside. My wife must have heard all the noise I was making and came to investigate. She asked me worriedly what was wrong. I looked at her and said, "It's nothing, I'm just happy to be home." I never saw that creature again after that. But then again, after that night, I never drove that way in the dark. And number 5. The Things by the Bayou, submitted by Johnnyboy. My name is Johnny. I was around 8 years old when I saw the little men, as I call them. I should start by saying that I grew up in a small, superstitious town in central Louisiana. So, any little thing that happened that couldn't be explained right away was quickly blamed on supernatural forces. But I've never had an experience as vivid and real as this one. I lived in a small 3-bedroom house with my mother and sister at the time. My father lived across town as my parents were divorced. Our house was old and creepy, but not as creepy as its surroundings. To the north of our house, just across the street, was a levee that separated our road from a small patch of woods and a bayou. Now, I usually tried really hard at the time to stay away from that area, due to the fact that a few people had died in those woods. However, one gloomy day, I decided I would walk to the top of the levee and try to see some deer in the woods. It was an extremely quiet day, and around twilight, rain clouds loomed overhead, blocking out what was left of the sun. Only a bit of daylight lit up my surroundings. As I walked across the street to the base of the levee, I became a bit dizzy and disoriented, but it only lasted for a moment, and I brushed it off as being tired, as I had been playing outside all day long. My bare feet struggled to find their grip as I trudged up the steep hill. It was at least a 20-foot climb of twigs and sticker bushes. When I finally reached the top, I sat on the ground trying to focus on my breathing. As I sat there, I heard a rustle in the weeds a few feet away from me. You see, levees are dirt mounds designed to keep water out of towns, so grass and weeds grow on them. The noise I heard startled me, and at first I thought it could have been a snake, so I stayed completely still. But I heard the noise again, and this time it was a little closer. I slowly turned my head towards the sound. The second my eyes made it to the spot where the noise was coming from, whatever was there had run down the levee towards the woods. It didn't run fast, but it was fast enough to become a blur of weeds and dirt. Myself, being the adventurous child that I was, I decided to follow it, because it could have been a raccoon or squirrel, and I loved watching small animals. I made my way down towards the woods, never taking my eyes off of the trail it made, so that I wouldn't lose its entryway into the woods. When I made it to the edge of the small forest, I again became dizzy. This time it lasted a little bit longer, and I had to take a moment to collect myself. An eerie feeling creeped up inside my gut, but I decided to be brave and enter the place that I had always avoided. I walked about 15 yards into the woods before I came up to a long, narrow bayou. I walked closer and noticed a large cypress tree growing along the edge of the small lake. Its roots twisted in and out of the ground. And that's when I saw them. There were 5 of them, all a little over 2 feet tall. Their bodies were incredibly thin, brown, and sickly looking. They stood upright on 2 legs, and their arms were incredibly thin. The heads on these creatures looked too big for their bodies, with long, stringy hair growing from the tops of them. The scariest parts of these things were their eyes. The eyes of these creatures were bright yellow, and caught the last bit of sunlight peeking through the trees, which made them look as if they were glowing. As I noticed these creatures, they noticed me. When my eyes met theirs, their mouths widened into hideous grins. I felt myself being sort of compelled to walk towards them, but fear overpowered me, and I turned around and ran as fast as I could. When I finally made it back to the house, my mother noticed I was shaken up and scared. She looked at me concerned. "Are you okay?" she asked. I was hesitant to tell her what I saw, but I did. As I told her my story, her face became pale. All she said to me was, "So you've seen the things by the Bayou too?" I haven't spoke of it again until now. The world is a scary place, and we are just a drop in its vast ocean of mystery. So sure, go into the woods, hike those trails, and hang out with your friends. But you've been warned, behind your back, just beyond the trees, terrible beasts are watching and wondering what you might taste like. Good night. Hey, Night Watchers, we are getting so close to 100,000 subs. So if you could all tell a friend about this channel and share as many of these videos on your social media sites as possible, we'll get there fast. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks.